Welcome back to the Killah Cortez Show. The following is an interview with Lenise Bent. Lenise is an American recording artist who has worked both in the music and film industry. She was one of a handful of women working in the Hollywood recording studio business in a technical role during the 1970s and was the first woman to receive an RIAA Platinum album for her engineering of Autoamerican by Blondie. Her credits include Asia by Steely Dan, Breakfast in America by Supertramp, Tusk by Fleetwood Mac, The Band, and many more. I met Lenise working as an assistant engineer at Mad Dog Studio in Burbank, California, where I assisted her on what were then my first studio sessions. Over the years, we've worked together on multiple recording projects, workshops, speaking engagements, and have shared many hearty laughs over drinks and lunch. Lenise is a friend, a mentor, and one of the first people to give me a chance in this wild journey in the music industry. This interview covers a wide range of topics and uncovers some gems of wisdom for anyone who is looking to go into music, start a small business, or go into some other kind of artistic profession. Her views on how to overcome adversity and how to conduct yourself in spite of the obstacles has made a massive impact on my life. And hopefully there's something to be uncovered here in this interview to help you on your path. This episode was recorded in an undisclosed restaurant location. Disclaimer, you might hear a bit of background noise. You're not hearing voices. Weaved in between the segments of this interview is a collection of songs from my Songs for the Apocalypse playlist. Half were selected by Lenise and half were selected by yours truly. You can find the transcription, links, and show notes at www.thekillahcortezshow.com. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this discussion with Lenise Bent. What was it like taking 12 days to get drum sounds for Supertramp, Breakfast in America? What does that even look like? Walk me through a day.
Okay, well, actually, it's not as crazy as one would think. First, you'd have to determine where the best spot in the room is for the drums, and then setting them up. So that could have taken a day or so. You're not really getting sounds yet, so what has to be determined is choosing the microphones for the overheads, for the toms, for the outside of the kick, for the inside of the kick, for snare top, snare bottom, room. We didn't do the subwoofer, reverse Yamaha thing. That didn't exist yet. So that basically was what took up the time to get the drum sound. The focus was primarily on that kick drum. So you would place the RE20 with the outside head and have a little hole at one point that you would cut. Maybe it had a diameter of like 8 inches, and then you had decided what kind of padding you'd put in. Okay, a towel first inside. Well, that wasn't enough. Let's put a little sandbag in there. Well, that's not sounding so right against the beater, so let's make the hole a little bigger. Okay, so cut the hole a little bigger.
Oh, you would cut it, like with scissors?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure. And you'd try a different mic, maybe a 421 back then. The D12 thing wasn't a big deal back then. Believe it or not, people tried 421s at that time as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. You just try a variety of different microphones, and the reason for that attention to that kind of detail is because Bob Siebenberg, the drummer for Supertramp, had a signature sound that was enormous, and that was a big part of their sound and their...
Was that based off like the live show, or was he just like a hard hitter?
Not so much. It was both Crime of the Century. That record put them on the map. I know that was the inspiration for many people to become sound engineers, myself included. It truly is the record that when I heard it, I said out loud for no apparent reason, I want to make records that sound like this. I had never been in a recording studio. I was studying film at college, and it just hit me so hard. That whole record, the sound of that record was just so amazing that that had to be in place. That was really important to make sure that happened. And you don't just use the close mics, it's the overheads, it's everything. It's the room mics, it's everything to capture that sound. So, and they had the budget, and At the time, not only were we setting up drums, but they were bringing in all the guitar amps, and they were bringing in all the Wurlitzers, and they were bringing in the plants and the
plants.
rugs.
Sounds like they're moving in.
They did. Well, they were there for 7.5 months.
This was the Village?
This was Village Studio B, yeah, which was different than Studio B now. It was actually a mirror of Studio A back then. That's how they were set up, so they could have a window in between the two main studios, and they could open it up and do string dates or whatever if they needed both studios. So Studio A is pretty much the way it always was, for any of you listeners who know what Village Studio A is like.
How was it working? Because you already liked them, you already idolized them. How was it to have that experience, like going to be a fan and then suddenly you're working with this?
Well,
with this artist?
it was very deliberate on my part.
Yeah.
You know, irony, be careful what you ask for, you just may get it. That's what happened.
Yeah, you manifested it. You
I
made it
did.
happen.
I was so intent on making records that sounded like that, even though I didn't know what it meant. And at the time, like I said, I'd never been in a recording studio. Didn't even know that you did that for a living. I just knew it just came out of my mouth. So when I finally did go into a recording studio and have my epiphany and the angels sang, and I knew this is what I was supposed to do with my life, I went to recording school and got a job as an assistant engineer. And my goal was to work with the best producers, with the best musicians, in the best studio, with the best music, and the best equipment and engineers, and to learn from the best. So I made sure that was my focus. I was incredibly myopic about this. I
don't think so. I mean, it made you one of the best.
Well, thank you. I actually had no plan B at all. I just was, this is that thing I'm going to do, and went for it. And these things kind of lined up for me, thankfully. Getting a job at the Village was hugely instrumental in me getting to where I wanted to go, because at that time, there were big budgets, great bands. The only way you got into a studio like that was if you had proven as an artist that you were worth investing in by these record labels. So not a lot of riffraff came in there. Not anybody could make a record unless they had independent money, and those things did happen on occasion, but very rarely. Very rarely. You know, it's too much money to spend on somebody's, little hobby. So I got to work with all of these fine people and the talent and artistry. And so when I heard that Supertramp was coming in, not everybody knew that much about them at that time, where I was totally proficient in all their music. So I went to the studio manager and just said, out of the 6 assistants who are here, I really want to work on this record. And I shared my story and how much I knew about their music and all of that. And he said, well, that's really great, but they don't want to grow. And, record scratch, slamming on the brakes.
Yeah.
What? That had honestly never come up for me yet. And I'd been doing it for like 2 years. And I just couldn't believe that was the answer I got. Never once occurred to me. I didn't ever see why women couldn't do it, because there were 3 other women assistants at the Village. So I had no other point of reference. I didn't really know it was the boys' club that everybody says it was. And in retrospect, I look at it back and I go, yeah, I guess there were some issues about being a woman, but that was just kind of the way it was, and you didn't make a big deal about it. You just rose above it and proved yourself being authentic and being that person you want to be. I was so driven that sort of stuff didn't stop me. So it once again, it didn't stop me, and I kept fighting for this. It was going to be about 2 months before they came in, and I kept bringing it up, and they kept saying, no, no, no. There were 2 male assistants, and like I said, a total of 4 women. And 2 nights before they were to come in, I finally surrendered and was upset and gave up and went out and drank too many margaritas and actually daiquiris, and went home and passed out, and all upset that it wasn't going to happen. And then
you get the call.
I got the call at 10 o'clock at night, woke me up out of my drunken stupor, and said, be in Studio B on Sunday at noon. You will be assisting Supertramp. And I just went suddenly sober.
Incredible. What happened?
The 2 guys didn't want to do it. One guy was in a project that he was actually engineering, and so he didn't want to assist again. And the other one, I think, had another project, or it was going to be... See, this was the thing. They were going to be there 7.5 months. That meant that you couldn't work with anybody else. You couldn't work on anything else. And some people wanted to move forward faster than that. I didn't care. I wanted to have that experience. So that happened. So when I walked
So you went all in.
I went totally all in. And when I showed up on Sunday at noon, and the person who was like their 6th member, Russell Pope, who was an amazing person, rest in peace, dear friend, he's sitting at the console, and he kind of turns his head to the right, kind of like a potato bug would. That's what it made me think of. His body didn't turn, but his head just kind of turned, and he looked at me, and he said, "May I help you?" And I said, "Well, actually, the question is, may I help you? I'm Lenise Bent, and I'm the assistant on your project. Where would you like me to start?" And
wow.
And I saw he had the big eyes, very British. I don't think they had been alerted that a woman would be their assistant, but I'm confident in the fact that they really didn't have an opinion about it. I think somebody had said, well, we have male and female assistants. Do you have a choice? Well, I guess we'll use a guy.
Right.
I don't think it was anything more than that, because from the beginning, once they got over the shock, as the various members came in, it took a while to set up the way they were going to be working on this, so people would drift in, and they had crew and, everybody that came over from England to work with them. And so once they, got over that immediate shock, it was fine.
I love the part about having no plan B, because I have something else I'll allude to later on in this interview that's one of the main things that I've taken away from you as a person. But let's move forward. What was the last thing that you listened to?
Oh, musically?
Yeah.
Oddly enough, last night I was at the Troubadour and heard Skunk Baxter from Steely Dan and Doobie Brothers, and amazing guitar player.
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah, right. Well, he was, iconic guitar player, God.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was at the Troubadour last night, so I popped over and heard him, and it was wonderful.
So you're from Compton, California.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard in another interview that your very first recording was with the Compton Orchestra at 9 years old. What was that experience like? And did you have an inkling then that recording music was going to become something special in your life?
Absolutely not. I had no idea. My older brother had been it was the Compton Festival Orchestra, and it was a collection of the elementary school orchestra students back then, boys and girls, in the Compton Unified School District and Los Angeles School District and all around. We had music programs. We had art programs. So every elementary school had an orchestra that started at 8 years old. We had choir. That was just part of your education. And so if you were interested, you auditioned. They would test you whether you could tell if this note was below this note on the piano. Dum dum. Which
Yeah.
one's higher? The second one. Okay, you're in.
Oh, no.
And I was also taking piano lessons. So, but my older brother had been in festival orchestra, and I already knew that you got to make these records, and so that was just, part of the perks. And so my other brother Richard and I were in this particular festival orchestra. He was a year older than I was, so he played trumpet and I played flute, and the final performance that we did, they recorded, and we got these records, and oh my God, they're god-awful and hilarious.
You still have that record?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was in it for 3 years, so I have 3 records.
You're like, maybe I didn't pass that test.
or if I did pass that test, I don't think it mattered to anybody.
You came up in the 70s as a female engineer in a male-dominated audio engineering field. I heard a great quote from you in regards to pushing those music industry boundaries. You said you would tell people, I don't need you to tell me no, I need you to tell me how. What is the significance of those words?
Well, it's huge because, and I kind of approach my life that way anyway. I figure if I don't do anything, I already have no. So that inspires me to at least give something a shot, because otherwise, I'll never know. But for me, still to this day, there are a lot of things we don't know. One of the great things about engineering in our industry, as you know, is that we're constantly learning new stuff and digging it, You have
to always be learning.
Yeah, and it's exciting. It's like, oh, what does this thing do? And what happens when I push this button? And, what happens when I twiddle this knob? And so it's our innate sense of curiosity and joy in what we do. You have to be passionate about it. But so when somebody would say, if I ever hit a barrier, which often was the case, in my recording school the first night, there was me and 50 guys, and it was a lecture hall, and they were just talking about amplitude and velocity and square waves and Doppler effect and compression and equalization, all these things. I had no idea what those were, and I just panicked because I dropped out of university to go to this trade school, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm so screwed, and called my friend Roger, who had invited me over to his recording studio. Then that's what inspired me to want to do this. He said, oh, come over, and because I was panicking and like that. And so I did. And he walked me through things and demonstrated the equipment. They were just talking about an equalizer. They weren't saying what, or, here's an 1176 limiter compressor, and this is how it works. And when you put a signal through it, and then you squish it, and it sounds like this. Okay. Now it makes sense.
I mean, I bet you learned way quicker. I mean, I bet you even just one day there, you went back to school and you were just like, all right, I feel way better about this. I'm
absolutely.
advanced.
Absolutely. No, he literally scraped me off the ceiling. Class was Monday and Wednesday nights, and then I'd go over to his studio, which was, it's not his studio. He engineered for Leon Russell, who was, those of you out there, if you don't know him, look him up. Incredible artist, composer, keyboard player, musician, musical director, and member of the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
And absolute innovator. He was one of the few people who had a home studio at that time. Nobody did. It was expensive, took up a lot of real estate, and so he had one in his home. So that's what
And that was your dojo.
It was, absolutely. And so on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because I wasn't in university anymore, I would go over to Leon's house and practice what I had learned before they started engineering or, working on stuff. Like around 2 to 4 in the afternoon, I'd kind of have to,
Yeah, wrap it up.
To wrap it up. Yes, exactly, and get out of the way. But I would work on stuff Roger was working on, and my boyfriend at the time was in a band with Roger. He was the lead singer, so there was stuff to record and stuff to mix and stuff to fiddle with, and so yeah, and any opportunity that I got in that situation, because there were several people coming in and out who were working in other studios on other projects, and they'd say, "Oh, well, I'm over at Conway, come over there," or I'm up at Indigo Ranch, you should come and see what that's like. And because I was so driven that it opened up doors for me. I guess that energy just people knew I meant it. I wasn't just,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's something I think that's so huge that can be missing, I think, from today's education system, at least for engineers or anybody who's doing audio, is that there's not a lot of places to do that. Like now,
Exactly.
like when I came up, I had the opportunity to work at a studio and actually see what a commercial session's like. And now it's so different what a session is now. But I think the thing that's missing is the part where you're talking about, where you get to practice and you get to go in and just get the reps in. I mean, I really do worry about that for what are going to be the future audio engineers. I don't know if they're going to have the rooms, if there are enough rooms to support the people that need to come in and actually just do the reps.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't think enough people understand the fact that it is an acquired skill.
Yeah.
It's something that the more you do it, the better you get. And you understand the nuances and the subtleties of what audio recording really is. It's beyond just basic recording techniques. You have to have an ear for it. You have to understand music. You have to be able to communicate. It really helps to be able to play an instrument or learn the language of music, and just practicing that craft and getting your social skills.
So whenever I speak to people about how I've built my own skill set in the studio, I always reference you as my studio etiquette mentor.
Oh, thank you.
From those early sessions in my career that I assisted you at Mad Dog Studio. And I truly credit you with teaching me how to properly act in a studio session environment, and the importance of keeping the vibe up and focusing on the craft, but also, and probably more importantly, focusing on the people. Can you speak to that a little bit and maybe say how you became so good to become like the vibe master in the room?
Oh my gosh. Well, I learned that from the people I worked with at the Village as an assistant. And one particular session, I'll give as an example. During that time, there was a lot of partying in the control rooms, and there would be jokes and frivolity and alcohol and whatever, but they had a mission to accomplish. And so one particular session, though, really nailed it for me. It was with a singer named Debbie Boone. And Debbie Boone had a big hit single called You Light Up My Life, which was played to death, and people used it in their weddings and in their Valentines, and it was, you light up my life, you give me hope to carry on. And it was just everywhere, to where you couldn't stand to hear it, and she people made fun of her and stuff. And so when I was told one day that she was coming into the studio, I just, snotty little me said to myself, oh, I don't want to work, Debbie Boone, blah, blah, blah. And, well, her situation was this. She was going to be leaving the next day for a tour for 6 months, starting in Japan, and she needed to sing 10 lead vocals.
Wow.
Before she left. And
how much time left?
Well, it was noon on Friday, and she was leaving at 6:30 the next morning. The car the car was coming to the studio to pick her up and take her to the airport. Her producer, Brooks Arthur, gathered our little team together, me, the engineer, and like an intern or somebody, and he said, I need all of you to help me do this. We have no wiggle room here. I need you all to help me because we have to get this done. So he immediately engaged us all, and he said, this is how I want it set up. I'm going to have the lights down. If you could stay out of her line of sight so all she can see is me, and we're going to get this done together. So immediately I said, boy, nobody has ever really said that. So we started. She walks in. She starts her songs. We have to listen to bits. He's producing her vocals, saying, playing back, okay, I'll punch you in here. This is all to tape. We go through the day. We go through the night. She sleeps in her chair in the control room drinking ginger lemon tea that nobody did back then. It was whiskey or whatever. And here she was such a pro. He inspired and pulled those performances out of her. We did it all, got it all done. The car came at 6:30. She got in, she left the studio and went to Japan. And I have never written a fan letter to anybody. Mm-hmm. I wrote one to her.
Wow.
To say, you inspired me, you showed me what a true professional is, and a few other things. And then Brooks Arthur, that's when I learned, okay, that's a producer. Mm-hmm. And that raised the bar.
Yep.
100% right there, that session.
Had a plan and executed that plan.
Like,
led a team.
Oh, it was stunning.
Wow.
So that has been my magic feather.
Wow.
I always think of that. If he could pull that off and she could pull that off, and the respect, it was mutual respect. We all, it was kind of scary. If you can imagine.
It's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure, and we just kept it, but he kept the vibe easy. We all just kept it real cool and got it done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of session that could easily go off the rails, because as soon as it feels like it's going to be slipping and you're not going to get it done, then it could really go off the rails.
Yeah. But I mean, for her voice, for her to be such a professional singer, to know how to control her voice so she still could sing at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And to do the right things, her husband was in there rubbing her feet, it was just whatever it took to get this baby bath. And that taught me more than anything.
And that right there to me is like the producer's role, like whatever it takes to get the thing to happen, whatever you got to do, your job is to cajole it out of the artist.
Yeah.
You tell a great story about holding the Steely Dan tapes for Asia in the trunk of your car. Can you tell that story for the listeners?
Well, I can now, because nobody's going to fire me or arrest me now. But there was.
Wait, is that Donald?
Oh, Donald wouldn't do anything now. So one day we were had been working on the Asia album for like 10 and a half months, and that had been about a year for them because they started it earlier elsewhere. But at the Village, we'd been there for about 10 and a half months. So they were kind of over budget and kind of over their time frame. And one day we casually walked into the control room, and there were probably 8 suits from Warner Brothers sitting there around Walter Becker, who had gotten there earlier. And he said, "Oh, glad you guys could show up." And I just turned around and left the room going, whoops. And we'd been out playing basketball, waiting for Walter to show up. We'd gone over to the high school, Gary Katz, their producer, Roger Nichols, and Donald Fagen and me, just to shoot some baskets. If you knew those guys, imagining them shooting baskets is pretty hilarious. But we did that, and then walked in, bouncing the ball down the hallway, and then walked in and saw that, and Donald had the ball, and he turned around and threw it at me. I grabbed it and just hot-tailed it out of that room. And 2 hours later, I got called into the room. I can't believe this. But they said, okay, what Warner Brothers wanted to do, they said, you've had enough time, you're taking too long, we're going to take the tapes and have somebody else mix them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that wasn't going to happen.
Yep.
So their bright idea, and I went along with it, was, okay, every night I would load the 2-inch masters into the trunk of my little Toyota Corolla. And and there's speakers in there. You know, speakers have magnets.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, didn't even think of that. Drove them home every night and then drove them back every day in case somebody came to the studio and said they wanted to take the tapes. Nobody would know where they were. Well, if you think about it, who's the first person they would ask? Where'd the tapes go, Lenise? And of course it'd be me. Of course I'd know. And that's major theft.
Yeah.
I look back at it now and go, what an idiot. And you never do that. But I think the Village would have had my back, but that's not who would have arrested me. Except the Village would, you know, I don't know what would have happened. Thank goodness I didn't get caught. And we ended up mixing the record and everything went fine. But I would take it, it was for a couple weeks.
What was the vibe like during those sessions? Were they really focused and like working all the time? Did it feel like a study of music, or was it like a lot of breaks? How were those sessions?
Are you talking about
the Asia sessions?
The Asia sessions. Oh, intense.
Yeah.
Intense. Not a lot of small talk with Donald and Walter, and or Gary Katz, or Roger Nichols, the engineer. I mean, he was probably the most social out of all of them. But no, they talked a little bit. You'd get right into it, and it took me almost maybe up to 2 months to feel really comfortable around them, understanding that, because I'm a pretty social person, and other sessions had been more social, and they just weren't. But I got to be good friends with them.
Yeah.
Individually.
And then they probably opened up.
No.
No.
No, that's just the way they were. I just understood it better.
Uh-huh.
And
You just didn't take it personal at that point?
no, I wasn't intimidated after that. I just, that's just who they are,
Yeah.
or who they were. And so it's funny when I see an interview with them, or I just saw Steely Dan at the Hollywood Bowl, and for Donald to be doing banter in between songs, it just cracks me up, because that's just not his comfort zone.
Yeah.
Once he's playing and doing all of that stuff, he's, perfectly happy, but the small talk in between doesn't do that. So, that's not him. So it was great, but it was intense, and they were, as Donald would say, I don't want it perfect, I just want it right.
Yeah.
And that's both of them. And together, and with Gary Katz, I mean, there were a lot of overdubs, and they basically wanted to get the drum track, because they could overdub anything else after that. So,
which the drums sound incredible on that album.
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot. Well, I learned things from Roger the Immortal Nichols, like don't let your mic cables touch, and use the shortest mic cables you can. All of that minutia that you think, nobody's going to hear, or that doesn't make any difference. It does. Ultimately, when people say, why does a Steely Dan record sound so good? It's those reasons.
The attention to detail.
Well, and to know just the crossover things, the little things that will make the difference. Mm-hmm. Well, so many people think you're not going to hear that stuff, and I don't know if people today even care, but we did back then.
What was it like working with Larry Carlton?
Oh, great. I mean, he's, such a joy. Well, everybody on their sessions there were no slouches ever.
All assassins, every single one of them.
Every single one. So it was always a pleasure. And then when I found out that they were coming in, and I was asked if I wanted to work with them, that I was warned it's going to be a long time. So you may not want to work that long with them, but it'll be probably the best record you ever do.
Who told you that?
The studio manager did, Dick LaPalme, who was in charge. He told me that. after a particular session, I think I've shared this with you. It's one that people ask me about. What was the most intense session with Steely Dan? And it was for a song called Home at Last. And there is a bit on there where it goes, dun, da, da, da. Well, the danger on the rocks is surely past. This is going to tape, and so the phrasing of that particular, those two words was critical to Donald's happiness with how the song went, because he had to sing it, and he hated singing. He said, I can't stand it. Get Barry Manilow, get Barbra Streisand, get somebody else. I can't do this. And he didn't like how he sang, but he couldn't find anybody who could sing what he needed to have sung or for his music, so he had to do it. And so vocal sessions were really tough.
Yeah.
Just because he was
hard on
suffering.
themselves? He was hard on himself?
He was so hard on himself. He would jam his hands in his pockets till his knuckles bled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he was just, Gary Katz would find a relaxant pill of some sort. We called it Jerko Jesus. It was Percodan. Give him a Percodan, and he would...
Just ready to go.
Well, he'd settle down, and then we could all relax a little bit. But so it was, there wasn't a lot of play in their sessions. So this one where,
except for basketball.
The basketball, God, that was so out of character. It cracks me up to think about it. But the session with the sessions each day usually lasted 4 to 6 hours. So on Monday, we start, it happens about 3 or 4 times in the song. I can't remember exactly, but every time you'd hear, da, 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 punch, punch out. And again, da, 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 punch. In and out again. So the first night we did the melody. Tuesday night we doubled the melody. So it had to be exactly like the other one. Wednesday, the harmony. Thursday we doubled the harmony. After that, I was having nightmares.
Yeah.
And so I went upstairs to the studio manager's office. I was I can't do this. This is, I'm having nightmares. I can't take it. And he goes, you get back down there and you work on that record. So it's going to be the best album you've ever done.
I love this quote from renowned ethnobotanist Terence McKenna. He says, nature loves courage. You make the commitment, and nature will respond to that commitment by removing the impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream, and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done, by hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it's a featherbed. Now, the reason I bring this up is that one of the major lasting memories that I have of you when I first started is that you really impressed upon me the idea of just letting go and having faith that the next gig is going to come, that things are going to work themselves out. And you said to me, you're going to stare into the dark and you need a hand to get you to the next thing. And you have to have faith that that hand is going to come and grab you and take you to that next step. Can you speak to that?
Man, I love that quote. It's so real. It's the truth. It's the truth. And thank you for reading it or quoting it for me, because sometimes we all need that reminder. But it's true. In our industry, when you're going into something that is as mysterious and unstructured and creative and recording music, it's an art. It's one of the few places where science and art come together. Mm-hmm. And so you're using both sides of your brain, and what drives you is your soul and your passion for this thing. Any of us who has chosen this as a career path, or it's actually a way of life path, we've been captured by that passion, and that passion has been awakened in us, and we have to have faith that we were chosen to do this for a reason. I guess it's what I don't know what makes me happier, and I don't know what else I would do quite like this if I hadn't discovered this, but it discovered me, and I responded. And you have to have that faith, because there are no guarantees anywhere, and you have to participate. You have to show up and demonstrate your passion and desire, and your authentic desire to do this. And it does attract. I know we hear so much about the laws of attraction. It's real. It's so real, because that's all I can attribute what has happened for me. People come out of the woodwork. I get a phone call from somebody I've never met for a project I know nothing about, and I'll be asked, can you work and do this sort of thing? I just did an immersive audio project for a sound healing recording. I'd never done that. And so I said, sure. And I educated myself, and it took me out of my comfort zone to grow, to do this. And the best part was I got to practice my craft and fulfill my joy and passion for recording.
Yep.
So that's the motivator. Does it make sense? No. Is there... it makes sense in one way, is that it's being true to yourself. What we were raised to get that job that pays you X amount of dollars, and, with benefits and all that stuff. Sadly, in looking back, we have none of those security blankets in our industry. We are totally driven by our passion.
This is why I love so much what you said at the start of this interview about having no plan B, is that it seemed like you had already internalized this quote, this lesson. You kind of already somehow knew that if you put your energy into this, that it would happen. And it did. It happened for you.
It did, and it does every day. Every single day. Whether I know it or not. If I'm working or not, I take comfort and I have faith in the fact that I'm preparing for the next project or the next thing that's coming. It's coming towards me. You have ebbs and flows in our world. You'll get a great project coming in, and then you'll complete that, and it's just like, oh, now what? Yet just having that faith and desire in yourself and what it is that you want to do, and showing up, participating in your community. It's a huge community of like minds, and we all support each other because we understand this unrealistic drive of ours, and what years ago was a very successful industry to get into now has changed dramatically. Yet content needs to be created, commercials and webisodes and all of that sort of thing, and it all requires sound. And as they say, picture without sound is just surveillance. So all of that requires us. It needs music, it needs dialogue, it needs sound effects, it needs mixing, it needs ambience, it needs broadcasting, it needs so many things. And so it's a viable career to go into, yet it's not terribly secure.
Yeah. I think nowadays it is very difficult to make it as an engineer solely. I think it's been, the craft has been relegated to, like, if you're a producer, then by de facto you're now an engineer plus producer. But there is still a lot of value in learning the engineering skills.
Oh gosh, yes.
And speaking of, you got to work with one of the greats. I mean, many greats, but one in particular. You got to work with Al Schmidt. Do you have any great Al stories?
I don't have a lot because I didn't work with him that much.
Okay.
Al mixed the Asia album. He worked. Actually, it was interesting. There were various mixed versions of some of those songs, and so Al said, "Well, I mixed that song," and Bill Schnee said, "Well, I mixed that song," and I clearly remember being a part of the mixing team for that song at the Village. So
Yeah.
I have no idea which one actually is on the
Which
record.
one made it?
Yeah, and
Wow. I wonder how many people actually mixed
and
that.
between. And Elliot Shiner worked on it as well. So, and that's just one example. But Al,
Was Ghost Mixer a thing? Was that ever a thing? Like you have ghost producers, but you ever have someone who they had it in their contract that they were going to mix it, but they liked the mix by someone else, so they just gave them the credit but paid the other guy?
you know what? As I wasn't aware of that. If that did exist, I don't think that's what it was. Because the positions were clearly defined back then. You had a producer, you had an engineer, you had an assistant engineer, then you had the band or the artist or whatever. Responsibilities were much more clearly defined. Mm-hmm. And technology was such that you needed an assistant running the tape machine. You needed the engineer at the console. You needed the producer working with the artist. And personally for me, I still like that format, and working quickly and making commitments and capturing the energy and the emotion of the session and the excitement and all of that.
I find even with a lot of modern technology, the best sessions tend to honor the spirit of that format, where they don't overuse the playlist ability of a lot of the modern DAWs.
Yeah.
It's really about the performance and the vibe and the energy in the room. What would you say has been the biggest adversity in your life, and how did you find the strength to overcome it?
Whoa, interesting. Well, for me personally, and you don't want to talk about this too much, but it's your health.
Yeah.
Creating balance in your life is absolutely essential, physically and mentally, emotionally, because you will have burnout. I did, and it affected me not just mentally, but I ended up being very ill physically. I got cancer, and that's pretty much a stress-related disease. And my doctor said, quit your job or die, because I had no balance in my life. I was working constantly, like 20-hour days, 18-hour days.
Wow.
I had no other life. We were just cranking out record after record, and that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't eating right, wasn't treating my body right. And that experience, I just finished a Blondie album that was pretty important in my career.
Yeah.
And and I was told to quit my job or die. And I was relieved because I was so exhausted and so ill and had to get well. And the pressure of the music business and the way I was doing it was wrong. And the situation I was in was not healthy. And so I did get well, clearly, yay. And but when I went back to work, I didn't really go back to work for 8 years. I took a hiatus.
Yeah. Took the time to heal yourself.
I had to, and just I had other things going on. I got to be a girlfriend for a while.
Yeah.
And that was, that was exciting and fun until it wasn't. And then that ran its course. And then, so I came back to work, but I went into post-production because the thought of going back into the music business at that time, and things had changed dramatically. Budgets had gone away. Digital formats were coming in, all sorts of reasons that didn't sound like a lot of fun for me.
Yeah.
Yet the pressure would still be there and all. So I went into post-production and applied my skills there, and actually could make a really good living doing that. And but I didn't have the passion for it. How could you?
Yeah.
When it's not, you don't get tears in your eyes and goosebumps, making a Foley sound. Wow, listen to that, crash.
Post doesn't have the same feeling as making a record. At least not for me either. It's hard to do that.
Yeah, had to remind myself how grateful it was that I had the skills to do this, but it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
Through the years, it evolved to where I ended up having an opportunity to be a foreign dubbing supervisor to produce vocals for foreign versions of movies, and which everybody just wants you to know I got all my best gigs at parties, and that was one of them. Showing up at a party I almost didn't go to. Somebody was opening a mastering facility, and it was a Sunday night, and I had a rollerblading accident. My leg was all screwed up, and I was just going, oh, God, I don't want to go. But I want to, support her. And so I drug myself to this party and walk in, and I'd been doing post for a long time. And I see this person there who had worked for Disney sitting there, but this was for a mastering facility.
Yep.
And so there's all these musicians and all of this and people I hadn't seen for a long time. So this woman, she goes, Lenise, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I used to be in the music business. She goes, really? And I said, yes. And she goes, can you read a score? I said, yeah. Because going back to the Compton Festival Orchestra, I learned how to read a score when I was 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old. So she goes, great, can you be in Tel Aviv in 3 weeks? And I went, sure. Why?
Yeah, why? Just to hang out.
Yeah, she goes, well, I'm no longer with Disney, I'm with Dreamworks, and they've got this movie, and they need somebody to produce the foreign vocals, working with the musical director. So I said, sure. I'll go. So that started 6 years of doing foreign dubbing. Yeah, I've been all over the world. What movie would that have been? The movie was called The Road to El Dorado, and Elton John had written all the songs domestically, and so it's a wonderful, wonderful animated film that I highly recommend everybody see. The music's fantastic, and what they do for animated features is they dub them in like 70 different languages because kids can't read subtitles. So they have a crew of people overseeing the foreign versions to make sure the storyline and the lyrics are appropriate, because it's not a translation, it's an adaptation.
Right.
So you adapt it to the different territories.
Wow, what a job.
It was fantastic. So I worked on Shrek and Rio, and I worked on...
so cool.
Yeah, I've been in Scandinavia and Amsterdam and Shrek 2. Where did I do that? Oh, I did that in Greece and Turkey. I was in Athens and Istanbul for that.
Wow.
Yeah, but I walk into this party, and then... so I got that gig, just walking in, and then somebody else comes up to me and says, hi, I haven't seen you in so many years. I'm now the president of Royal Tone Studios, and I'd like to give you some studio time to check out our room. And I went, cool, okay.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
And then this band comes up, this young band, and they say, oh, whoa, are you Lenise Bent? And I went, yeah. And they said, oh, we love what you did with Blondie and all the records you did. Said, we'd love it if you'd record our EP. We've got a budget. And I said, cool, I've got studio time.
Yeah, I got studio time.
So
this all happened within the same party? This
happened at a party I wasn't going to go to.
Wow.
So all three of those things happened at this party. So anytime an opportunity arises or something like that, and I go, oh, I don't feel like going, I remind myself,
You're like, remember
of that,
the party.
and I get myself together and I get out there. Because one of the biggest important things in our industry and to moving forward is it's not so much what you do, which is very important. It's also important who you know, but it's much more important who knows you.
Okay, very important question. If you absolutely had to choose one, would you choose the smell of guitar amp tubes warming up or the smell of fresh apple pie from the oven?
Oh, that's not fair. That's just so not fair. My earliest
If one had to go off the island.
Well, you can't eat tubes, so
Wow.
so there's that. If you
pie
put it
wins.
like that, the pie wins there, but not in every situation. My very first comfort smell memory is my brother Wayne. He was 16 years old and working at Jan's Electronics in Compton, and I was 3 years old. And he would bring broken amps and receivers and stuff from the 50s. I don't know what it all was, but it had to be turned on and warmed up, and there were tubes in it.
I love that smell.
And there was just something so comforting about that smell to this day.
Yeah.
When somebody turns that on, I just go right back to that place. You know, my thumb almost goes right in my mouth, and and my blankie's by my face, and I'm smelling tubes.
What advice would you give to young people thinking about getting into the music business?
Well, depends on what area you want to get into. Mm-hmm. That has a lot to do with it. Right now, it's the Wild West. You're only limited by your imagination. There are certain things, if it is your heart's desire, I recommend educating yourself and making yourself as valuable as possible. Again, learn an instrument. And this is something that you would speak about as well. Learn an instrument, learn music theory, learn to speak the language. Because what you want, if you're going to be in it, is you don't just want a hit career, you want a long career.
Yep.
And so you need to have a variety of skills and be willing to apply yourself in a variety of levels. If it's tuning pianos when you're not making a record, if it's working in a music store, if it's teaching classes or being a vocal coach or guitar lessons or piano lessons or playing weddings, or it's practicing your craft. It's all music. Say if you're driven like I was, then you have to go for it. And so just make it the best it can be for yourself. You have to have that drive, though, to succeed. It's not easy, and I'm not going to try to talk you into anything here. It's okay if you try it out and it's not what you want. You found out. Mm-hmm. So if you take that class or you go in a certain direction, or you may find being an engineer isn't what you want to do, but you'd be an excellent studio manager, or you'd be a much better live sound person than you would be a studio engineer. Or I know a lot of musicians who, once they got in the studio and recording, either realized they weren't quite the musician they needed to be to succeed that way, but boy, did they really embrace the recording techniques and have been excellent engineers and producers. So we wear many hats. I do so many things.
Yep. And
as a result of that, I do have a long career. I engineer, I produce, I archive, I repair bad recordings, I do workshops on analog tape recording or anything anybody wants me to do a workshop on.
You do podcasts.
I do podcasts, yes. I consult. I volunteer. Mm-hmm. I give back. And I mentor. And because, as you can see, it's a way of life.
So before we wrap, I actually have a few listener questions.
Oh, of course.
This one comes from Scott Chesick. He asks, the stick hit during the saxophone solo in Asia, was it on purpose or was it an accident? If you remember.
If it was left in there, I don't know if it was an accident, but it's deliberate. And I don't think it's on the sax.
It's
track.
not on the sax, it's on the drums, but there's like in the middle of the sax solo. I think he's doing like tom fills, and then all of a sudden he hits the sticks. And
they would have removed that if they didn't want it.
Yeah.
It was intentional and part of the charm.
Nico Brujas asks, did the setup during the Asia session stay pretty consistent, or was there a lot of tearing down, setting up? How was that process?
Well, if we knew that we were going to be recording a few basic tracks in a row, we'd set up for a couple days. But back then, they pretty much, you brought in the A-team of session players, and they got a chance to do 2 or 3 takes. And usually, you made sure you're recording from the beginning because they often nailed it the first time. And if it wasn't happening after the 3rd take, we'd move on to something else, a different song, and maybe come back to it. Or what they would do is they would cut the songs, certain basic tracks, one day with a whole set of session players, and the next day there'd be a whole different set of session players doing the same song.
Would they ever splice the two takes together?
No, they would just want other players because maybe that wasn't the right combination they wanted. And so that's what it was. It was basically Donald and Walter. That's all Steely Dan was at that time, and everybody else was an iconic player that they loved and wanted to work on the record. And most of the time it worked, but sometimes they wanted to try different things and different artists, so they would. So it went pretty fast. We didn't do a tracking date for very long.
It was just the vocals when it was like 2 words a day.
2 words a day, yeah. Or, well, Chuck Rainey, great bass player. They would replace all his bass parts, and he would, they'd punch him in. Okay, those 2 notes were good. I'll pick you up after that one. Okay, let's go into the, bar 6.
Sandra Luca asks, tell us more about recording the Wayne Shorter solo.
Oh, boy. I'm glad somebody asked that. That was a magical, magical time because Wayne had been into the studio before, so I had met him before. He had been doing his record, Native Dancer. And the funny story goes, Donald really loved Weather Report and wanted Wayne Shorter to do the solo on Asia. So he calls Dick LaPalme, the studio manager, who was also a major jazz person. He'd been with Chess Records, and he was known as a jazz lobbyist, and he had just worked with everybody and promoted and, managed and all sorts of stuff. So he asked Dick for Wayne's number, and Dick gave it to him. So Donald calls Wayne and leaves him a message on his answer machine to please call him, and Wayne didn't know who he was, so he didn't call him back.
Oh no!
and Donald was just crushed, and he couldn't believe it. And Weather Report was actually recording across town at Devonshire Studios, and so he was in town. So Donald tells Dick, Wayne never called me back. And so Dick phone calls Wayne and says, Wayne, you really want to play on this record. Steely Dan's a really important group, and, big fan of yours. It's, if you want to do this, please call Donald. So he did. And so they set it up. And Wayne comes in, and he's a Buddhist, so he had to go upstairs and meditate for 2 hours first, and so he did that. And it was interesting because Donald never really stood up very straight or did, he wore like little T-shirts and, kind of looked funky. This day he's wearing pressed jeans and a dress shirt that's pressed, and he's standing up straight. I mean, just he's so in awe of Wayne coming in, and Wayne was just so sweet and kind, like he is, and went in the room, and they played him the part, and he did 6 takes, and in about half an hour, and left, and they comped it, and there you go.
Done. Incredible.
Yeah, it was absolutely magical. I can see in my mind's eye so many details of that day, and the sound and the comping. I mean, it was comped by lunchtime.
So we're getting to the end here. A couple more questions for you. If you could put a message in a song that would get 24/7 radio rotation and people would get it, what message would you send to everyone listening?
Oh, wow. I have to make it a hook here. Some people have said it really well. The message is, all you need is love. Mm-hmm. We are the world. I know none of these are original, but these are all important things that it's about being earthlings on our planet.
We're all here together.
We're all here together, and we're all earthlings. Not a single one of you can argue with that. There's no boundaries for countries. There's no division for anything else. Somebody has green eyes, somebody has red hair, somebody has dark skin. Whatever the person is, we're all earthlings.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lenise. Tell the people where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, I have a website. Go to Lenise at lenisebent.com.
Okay.
And you'll see a bunch of stuff there. Or if you Google me, you'll see a bunch of stuff there. But yeah, go to my website, and that's probably the best.
Great. Lenise, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for everything you've done in my career. And thank you for taking the time to chat with the listeners. We will see you soon.
Well, I have to thank you so much, Greg. I mean, just being your friend and us being thrown together on this planet and in our little world is one of my greatest blessings. And you're one of my favorite people in the whole world. And thank you so much for choosing me to be on your podcast.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you.
Bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Killah Cortez Show. Thank you again to Lenise Bent for sharing her experiences. You can find a link to her website, her socials in the description below. And you can find me by typing in Killah Cortez on pretty much any site. I have the KillahCortezShow.com where you can find other episodes. And yeah, until next time.